You're listening to the Savannah Institute's Pioneer Agroforestry Farm Tour Series. This audio recording features Kathy Dice and Tom Wahl of Red Fern Farm in southeast Iowa and was produced by Man Alone Media with support from the North Central SARE program. Be sure to check out the Pioneer Agroforestry Farm Tour video series at savannahinstitute.org.
I'm Tom Wahl. We're at Red Fern Farm near Wapello, Iowa. Red Fern Farm is a diversified fruit and nut farm with over 80 species. Chestnut is the most important, by far the most important. But other important crops on the farm include pawpaw, persimmon, heartnut, Asian pear, and honeyberry.
Great. Can you just take us through what your process is from establishment to management practices?
Well, the first step in establishment is site selection, because not all fruits and nuts will grow in all kinds of soils. So we select the appropriate soil for a particular crop. The next step is site preparation. Depending on what's growing there, we may need to eliminate the vegetative cover and replace it with something that's compatible with trees, such as a mix of turf-type perennial ryegrass, fine-leaved fescue, and Dutch white clover, which makes a good ground cover that doesn't compete with trees and shrubs, but prevents other weeds from coming in. Doesn't need to be mowed very often, doesn't get very tall. The next step is tree planting. We plant almost exclusively potted trees grown in special pots that prevent root spiraling. We dig a hole the same depth as the pot, plant the tree, and then immediately apply a 5-foot tall ventilated tree shelter. The tree shelter protects the newly planted trees from browsing by rabbits and deer, reduces mortality, makes the tree grow faster and start producing fruit or nuts years sooner than it would without a tree shelter. It also eliminates the need for pruning on the tree up to 5 feet tall. After that, maintenance consists of keeping the vegetation mowed short in between the tree rows to prevent mouse populations from building up, because if mice build up in tall grass, their favorite place to nest is inside tree shelters. And their favorite activity on a cold winter day, when they don't feel like going outside, is to gnaw on trees. So to prevent that, we keep the vegetation short, which allows hawks, owls, foxes, coyotes, bobcats, mink, and weasels to keep the mouse population down to where the damage they do to the trees is negligible. We also do weed control, which can be accomplished in 2 ways. The organic way is to apply a 3x3 square of landscape fabric around the base of each tree, and then top that with 2 to 4 inches of coarse wood chip mulch. And that provides just about 100% weed control. A cheaper, more chemical-intensive method is to use oust herbicide in place of the landscape fabric and mulch. It accomplishes the same weed control, but does it a lot cheaper. After about 5 to 7 years of that kind of maintenance, the trees get established, and then they need virtually no care after that. We've gone to harvesting almost exclusively by a pick-your-own system. So we maintain customer lists for each kind of crop we grow of people who want to come and pick their own. So when that fruit becomes ripe, we start calling the customers, notifying them that it's time to schedule a day to come and pick. And if they're interested in picking that year, they'll call, make an appointment to come and pick, and then they do the harvesting. And all we have to do is collect the money.
What about selling to the co-op? What's your experience with that?
I actually ran the Chestnut co-op for 13 years, so I did the buying and selling for the co-op during that period. But I turned the co-op over to someone else after 2013, and in 2013 that was when we started doing the U-pick on the chestnuts, and since then we've gone to 100% U-pick on the chestnuts, so we have nothing left over to sell to the co-op. I have nothing against selling to the co-op, and I would do so, except I just don't have anything for them because the customers come and pick everything every day.
I really like that. That was a really interesting story earlier that you told us about sort of a market that you didn't see coming. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Are you talking about the
Bosnia?
small and medium-sized nuts?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when we first started harvesting chestnuts, we really did not have a good market for the small and medium-sized nuts. In fact, we'd never sold any small, and we've sold very few medium-sized nuts. But some years ago, we had a Bosnian man from Waterloo, Iowa came down, and the only size of nut he was interested in was medium size. And he took about 300 pounds, took them back to Waterloo, and resold them into his Bosnian community. The following year, we had about a half a dozen Bosnians come down here, and they took 3,000 pounds of medium-sized nuts, which was all we had. And ever since then, the medium-sized nut has been the most popular size. In fact, within a couple of years of the first Bosnian showing up, we had a 2 to 4 year waiting list for medium-sized nuts. And today, medium-sized nuts bring a premium price at the co-op for the growers. So the growers get the highest price for medium-sized nuts and a lower price for large and extra large. The small size nuts are still harder to sell than the other sizes. Chinese people seem to be the ones who prefer the medium size the most. We can still sell them. They sell at a slightly lower price than all the other sizes, though.
Tell us a little bit about the nursery business and that side of your operation.
Well, we got into the nursery business completely by accident in 1993. I was able to collect some nuts from a couple of local chestnut trees. I decided to sprout them, and I sprouted about 300. I had no idea what I was going to do with them, but in the fall of 1993, when it was about time to figure out what to do with them, someone stopped by and saw them and asked if I'd be willing to sell any of them. And he bought 275 out of the 300 and started his own chestnut orchard, which is still in business today, 26 years later.
Those ones are yielding good?
Yes, and
Yeah.
he produced 9,000 pounds on 2.5 acres last year and sold them for $6.50 a pound.
So, have you seen a lot of folks be successful with becoming chestnut growers, and what kind of hurdles have you seen them have to overcome, yourself included?
Yeah. Quite a few people have been very successful growing chestnuts in Iowa and in the Midwest in general. The biggest problems come with people trying to plant too many acres too fast and then being unable to do the necessary maintenance on the young, newly planted trees right at the start. Without care right at the beginning, the trees just don't survive and grow. And I can show you a number of failures where people planted too many acres and couldn't take care of them and lost all or most of the planting. But people who started small and grew gradually have been very successful and are very happy to be in the chestnut business.
Mm-hmm. How have you diversified your income besides the chestnuts themselves?
Besides chestnuts, we also grow pawpaws, which are also sold to pick-your-own customers, and persimmons, and heart nuts, and Asian pears, and that's most of what we've marketed. Most of the other 80 fruits and nuts are just experimental, and some of them will never be commercial. Yeah, well, at the base of a lot of our trees, we planted perennial vegetables, including asparagus, rhubarb, salsify, horseradish, skirret, good King Henry, French sorrel, and probably a few other perennial vegetables. Most of those we've just used for our own use, not for market. But it helps diversify the operation. Biological diversity on the farm is important because it helps prevent buildup or attraction of pests and diseases. When you plant just one kind of crop over a whole farm, it is just like a giant magnet for whatever pests and diseases want to attack that crop. But by planting dozens of different kinds of trees, shrubs, and vines and ground covers, it kind of creates barriers in between the plants that pests and diseases have a hard time crossing, and it keeps their populations from exploding and damaging our crops.
Mm-hmm. Can you go into a little bit about your history, how you got into this, and sort of the long road view?
That's a really long, boring story. You probably don't want to hear that, but the short version is my background is in natural resource conservation. I have a degree in fisheries and wildlife biology. But even back when I was still in college, I realized that the vast majority of the problems that natural resource professionals have to deal with are a direct result of conventional agriculture. And that natural resource professionals tend to have careers consisting of defending small patches of nature from the encroachment of progress, and especially from conventional agriculture. I wasn't satisfied with that. I decided agriculture needed to be reinvented in a manner that didn't cause all those problems. And this is the result of all those efforts.
I feel like part of your message is that it's possible to make a good living off of growing chestnuts and diverse agroforestry type of plantings like this. Can you just sort of tell the people, kind of tell them how it's possible?
Well, I've been telling people for a number of years now that I think a farm family could make a very good living on as little as 10 acres, as long as they consisted of the right soils. Right now I'm making on our mature chestnut trees $10,000 an acre on a crop that I don't even have to harvest, because the customers do just about all the work. And the only thing I have to do is mow the grass under the chestnuts before the nuts start dropping, and then collect the money. So on 10 acres of chestnuts, theoretically, you could be earning $100,000 a year. If you add pawpaws under the chestnuts, you could double that. If you added honeyberries in between the rows of pawpaws and chestnuts, you could maybe increase that again by maybe another 50 to 100%. Not everybody can live comfortably on $100,000 a year, but I think most farm families can. And this is proof that you could do that. Okay, well, this unit of the farm on this side of the road consists of 3 groves, what we call the North Grove, Middle Grove, and South Grove. In all 3 of these groves, the Chestnut is the most important crop tree, but interplanted among them are heart nuts, which are a type of walnut that produces a valentine heart-shaped nut. Persimmons, which is a native fruit tree, native to Iowa and native to this county. Pawpaws, another native fruit, a fruit that produces a kind of potato-sized and shaped fruit with a flavor like a cross between banana and mango. Asian pears, which are a close relative of the familiar European pears, but are crunchy when they're ripe and they're picked ripe from the tree. And honeyberries, which is a native honeysuckle that produces an edible fruit that tastes like a cross between black raspberry and blueberry. Well, our reason for getting into this originally was to show that agriculture could be done without soil erosion and large quantities of toxic chemicals and large investments in fossil fuels and expensive equipment. We wanted to provide an example of a better way of doing agriculture. And in order to do that, we had to prove that it could make money, and that's been the struggle over the years. And it's just within the last few years that we've actually turned the corner and made this a very profitable business. We've made lots of mistakes along the way. I think we made all of the mistakes that can possibly be made along the way and learned a lot, and now we know how to do it.
What were some of the, if you could go back in time, what were some of the things that you would change?
Well, the first thing I would do is invent a time machine and go back into the past with ventilated tree shelters and oust herbicide, which would have made tree establishment much easier if we had had them 26 years ago. But without those, we should have done a lot better trying to control weed competition against the trees and establish a better ground cover in between the trees. But the tree shelters and the oust herbicide are game changers as far as getting trees established.
Where do you foresee the future of this industry in the Midwest?
Now, what I'd like to see is these kinds of perennial polyculture systems planted on lots of small farms rather than a large industrialization of this kind of system. But I'll settle for whatever we can get. Anything that results in high biodiversity and 100% perennial ground cover to prevent soil erosion will be the most important thing to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Do you feel good? Do you have anything else that you feel might be important for us to add to the interview?
I can't think of anything offhand, no.
Oh, we filmed the chickens, and we also filmed the cherries. Can you just go into a little bit of your process with why and how you raise chickens?
Oh, well, we used to raise chickens commercially. We raised around 1,000 chickens a year on pasture for customers. We processed them on the farm and sold them from the farm. We gave that up about 10 years ago. We now still raise chickens, but they're only for our own use. We have one flock for egg production and one flock for meat production. And as I said, it's strictly for our own use. We don't sell any eggs or chickens anymore.
Do you think that there's a place for animal integration in agroforestry?
Yes, there is, and I think animal integration is important. Unfortunately, the Food Safety Modernization Act of 2012 has made it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to integrate livestock with this kind of perennial polyculture system, just because of food safety regulations.
I'm Kathy Dice. I am here at Red Fern Farm as the bookkeeper, grunt, mower, helping with the nursery, helping with general management of the farm, helping with customers, and general assistant manager of Red Fern Farm.
Nice. Can you just tell us what it is that you do, and on the farm here, just a brief synopsis of your farm, your style of agriculture, the crops you grow.
Well, it has many names now. When we started out, we called it Comprehensive Integrated Agroforestry because we were planting trees and harvesting perennial crops at many levels, the trees, the shrubs, and then even underneath the shrubs, things like echinacea and asparagus. And we even had a sublayer with ginseng and golden seal. We kind of walked away from the ginseng, but the golden seal. So we had a multi-story perennial crop going on. But it's also called forest gardens now, or food forest, lots of different terms. But we're farming with trees.
It's an orchard. That's what I would
Yeah.
say.
Oh,
Right.
Tom doesn't like orchard. He likes groves. Because orchards, you kind of have all the same trees, and we're going for a really integrated approach. When we first started out, we tried to have just 10 trees of the same species in a block. And now we're even going alternate species. So like they'd be chestnuts, and then heartnut, heartnut, or chestnut, persimmon. And then in the alternate row, arona berries. And then in a row after that, pawpaws, chestnuts. So we're trying to mimic the biodiversity you would see in nature. Because the more diversity you have, the less problems you'll have with pests and even the nutrients you're taking out of the soil. So the more diversity, the better for your economics and for the pest management.
So let's talk about how this is such a long-term commitment. How have you seen that through this process of establishment?
Well, when you're dealing with trees, you're realizing that it's not an annual crop where you can plant it this year and you'll harvest something in 2 to 4 months. You're talking about something that you're planting this year and you're caring for it for 2 to 3 years, just babying that thing, hoping that it's going to start to grow, so that in 4 to 7 years, you're actually going to start to get a crop from it. And it won't maybe be till the 10th year that you're actually recovering the cost for those earlier 9 years. So it's something that you need to have a long-range outlook at. It's not something where you can change your mind in 2 to 3 years. You're committed for a long haul.
And how does that work in partnership with others or with you and your husband?
So if you're doing this by yourself, then you can just focus and say, I've got this land and I want to do this. And you can keep at it for year after year after year. But if you're in partnership with somebody, then you got to make sure that partner has the same outlook as you do, the same goals, and are as committed at it, because it's hard. I mean, any kind of farming takes a lot of time, but when you're doing a farming technique where you're not getting any reward for the first 5 years, it can put a lot of strain on relationships. I mean, now our farm is wonderful. We've got chestnuts, arona berries, Asian pears, heartnuts. Everything's producing now. We can stand under the shade of our trees. But it wasn't like that for the first 10, 15 years. There was like 10 years of constantly mowing around these little trees and watching them die. And then coming back and replanting and mowing some more. And then they didn't grow. And giving up vacation time and not giving maybe as much care as you should to your house or to your children, and putting stress on relationship. It's pretty hard. So you have to be really enjoying the work that you do. Love being outside. Love time on a mower. And realize that what you're doing is going to be good for yourself and your family and the environment in the long run.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I didn't quite be as pessimistic as I was before, but
Right?
because I'm always trying to be upbeat on the camera.
Yeah. We need that. We need that to move this next generation into this style of farming.
Yeah.
And if you could speak to that, if you could just give some hopeful words about the possibility of becoming a farmer like you.
Anyone can really start out with this as long as you have either a long-term lease or you own and manage your own little bit of land. And you don't have to have a lot of land, just 1 acre. 5 acres would be tremendous, but on your small little acreage, you can get trees growing. And those trees will keep giving and giving. Some things only have a short lifespan, like blueberries, but other trees like chestnuts are going to be giving to you for thousands of years from now. So every little tree that you put in and that you care for and that you keep growing and you get to that I'm now established stage is going to be benefiting you, your family, the world, not only from carbon sequestration and helping with the water filtration, but providing food and shade for people for years and maybe even generations to come. Be sure you plant things you like to eat because if you don't like to eat it, it's hard to be enthusiastic about it to other people. And if you can like eat a persimmon and say, yeah, this is really good, rather than going, well, it's just kind of sweet, not really a whole lot of flavor, then you're going to neglect that tree a little bit, and your enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm kind of passes on to customers too. So if you really like grapes, then go ahead and try and raise grapes. And if you really love cherries, then try to grow cherries, but it's best if you do like the plants that you're growing. But like me, you might learn to love the things that your partner is growing. I didn't like pawpaws in the beginning. I really enjoy them now.
How can you stay realistic about markets, and how can you pick something and go after it?
That is a very good question. Markets can be really, really tough, especially with trees, because something that's really popular right now, you might go and plant it, and 5 years from now, when your trees are producing, you might find that the market is not as hot. Plus, everyone else planted that crop 5 years ago. So you almost have to be a little far-ranging in your thinking, not necessarily looking at what's popular right now, but looking at what will grow well in your area, what you know tastes pretty good, and going ahead and trying to grow that in the hopes that a market might show up. But only plant a small amount. Don't plant like a solid acre of like kusa, okay? Just a little corner of the area so that as your kusa develops and you start to share it with people, then when you find other people are really enjoying that, then it's like, ha, I've got a market, because you can plant more kusa as your market grows. So be aware of the variety of fruits that might grow in your place and nuts, and don't be afraid to try new things. Just don't do a huge quantity of it.
Mm-hmm. What sort of unexpected changes have you seen in your approach to marketing or farming in general?
Unexpected change.
One of them was like the Bosnian market.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. So the good things too. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that we didn't foresee, it would be like with aronia crops. When we first planted aronia berries, we were really hopeful about them because they're easy to grow, they're very productive, and we knew that Americans were actually consuming a lot of aronia berry juice in the United States, and it was being imported. So we're like, all right, perfect crop. But it turned out a lot of other people were also planting aronia berry, and the juice market was actually very difficult to get into because you had to have your berries at a certain level of Brix or sweetness, and the people who are making the juice want to buy tons of these berries all at the same Brix level. So you had to have like a third party who would combine the juice and get it it was complicated. So that ended up not being an easy market to get into. On a good note, when we were first growing chestnuts, we had trouble marketing small and medium-sized chestnuts. But we tapped into the market of people from Western Bosnia who had immigrated to the United States like 10, 20 years ago. And it turned out they loved medium-sized chestnuts. And once they found that we were growing those size chestnuts, they flocked to our co-op at the time to buy thousands of pounds of medium-sized chestnuts and small chestnuts. So that was a happy revelation. I would say the other revelation is how many people, young people, really want to try and pick pawpaws, because it turned out that having a U-pick for pawpaws was the best way to market them, because pawpaws don't have a very long shelf life. But if you have a customer who's going out to your forest, picking the right pawpaws and taking them home, it's a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm. Is there, I don't know if we maybe covered some of this, but is there some advice that you would give farmers that are trying to get into a diverse system like this?
If you're getting into a diverse system, research what are, for example, the soil requirements for the trees that you're planning on growing. How hardy are they for your area? What are the pests for your area? Because there's a lot of plants all over the world, but not all of them are going to thrive in your part of the world. So research carefully before you even purchase your first trees. And that research should help you get the varieties that are going to do well. Because if you can get the varieties that are like blight resistant, or if you learn that bunch disease on heartnut trees can be easily controlled with a zinc spray, that's going to help you out a lot. So even though people are always saying the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, the next best time is right now, I would say maybe next spring after you did some research. Because once you've got that tree planted, if it's the wrong species, the wrong variety, it's not going to do well for you. And it's better to do your research before you plant the tree.
I love that. I would say maybe next spring after you've done your research. Oh God, that's so good.
I know, because so much say, yeah, you need to plant right now, right now. It's like, no, really? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my.
It took Tom and I around 20 years to get our agroforestry system to the place where it is now. And it's been a lot of frustration and hard work. I would tell people that Tom is the one with the vision, and he had a goal of what to get planted, and I was the enabler. Because for about 12 years I worked off the farm to bring in income to keep his habit going. And that's how I referred to it for a while, his habit, his tree planting habit. So it's really important, again, for partners to be on the same page and the same goal, because it's a very stressful situation if one person's really into agroforestry and wants to go do this and that, and the other person's like, yeah, okay, that's not really gonna work out. So it's important that both of you enjoy what's going on. And even if you're not the person out there planting, you're the person who's enabling, that you like walking among the trees and going, oh, look at this. Oh, this is bearing, oh, we're going to have fruit this year. And to be excited that way, and to know the importance you're playing with being supportive. Because it's not easy, and it's frustrating, and it can be like, oh my gosh, another year of drought. Why aren't these trees growing? And another one died, and why haven't you done this? And it can be really stressful because there's a lot of work. So I would always advise, do your research, start small. It's really exciting, but restrain yourself, go at it easy and carefully, and you'll have a much better time in the long run.